All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to being the best version of yourself. I'm your host, Dr. Carey Heller. Today, we have an exciting guest. We have Lisa, who's going to tell us a little bit about what she does, and then we'll jump right in.
Yes. Hey, everyone. My name is Lisa Guillot, and I am a transformational mindset coach and a personal brand strategist. So I come from a branding background. I had my own brand strategy studio for many years. I also worked in design agencies and studios with clients like Pottery Barn Kids, Crate and Barrel, Paper Source. And so now I actually take those practices of building a brand identity, for example, and the creative process, and weave that into my mindset work with my clients.
All right, great. Well, happy to have you. Thanks for the introduction. And so let's jump right in. So why would the idea of personal branding be important or helpful to someone? How does that connect to mindset?
Well, personal branding is kind of a loaded word. A lot of people have ideas about it, whether it's selfish or we shouldn't show up this way, or I don't even have a brand identity or a personal identity or a personal brand. But it actually really weaves into thought leadership, personal branding, your reputation, your character, how you show up in a room. And so taking a lot of it sounds a little bit trite, but a lot of the brand strategy work that I do with clients to develop their website or their book or, a set of printed materials, those ideas and that process can easily translate into personal branding or thought leadership. I think it's a really interesting use of words because you can show up and be a leader, no problem, and have a great staff, a great business, a great career. But then you add the word thought to the front of it, and that starts to incorporate who you are, your values, your beliefs, and how you show up in the world. Similarly, personal branding, the personal side is, again, it's just a reflection of your values, how you want to show up, the conversations that you want to be in. And then the branding part is how it then reflects out to others and how other people perceive you.
Okay, great. Well, so it sounds like one of the things that I'm hearing with this is that, if someone sort of wants to convey certain things to other people, thinking about it, whether you use the term branding or something else, it's the idea of really focusing on, this is who I am as a person. Is that sort of matching what I'm actually showing to others?
Exactly. Because when you so for example, if you consider yourself a calm, serene person, you think that way of yourself, but you show up and you're a tyrant out there in the world, right? There's a total lack of communication between yourself and how you're showing up in the world. And so when you align those things and you actually come from a place that's connected to who you want to be, how you want to treat others, how you want to be treated, and reflect that really becomes what I call your personal leadership style. And then others start to see you in that way.
Right. Well, and I guess I think about this from a parenting perspective as well. The idea of thinking about, how would you want your kids to view you? Kind of in, a different kind of leadership, but a very important and different way.
Yeah, no kidding. I've got 2 kids and 2 stepkids as well. So I've got sometimes I call it my zoo because we've got kids in college and kids in 4th grade. And trying to, I don't know, wrestle is the word that's coming up for me, but like how to wrestle with all the personalities in the house and, show up from a place that I'm loving and caring and active listening. It definitely takes practice.
Yeah. And I think it also gets to the idea too of like being authentic, that if you're trying to portray something that's not really who you are as a person, oftentimes it's clear that it comes off that way, but that probably doesn't really work so well in terms of navigating stuff if you're not really being authentic.
Yeah, it becomes very exhausting, I would think.
Yeah. And I think, something you mentioned a few minutes ago about this idea of branding kind of in a business world is that, in certain professions, sort of how you're branded as a person reflects sort of your direct role in that job, depending on the particular sort of field it is. I mean, some it's easier to separate out than others, but I think that's also an important point, that sometimes, the carryover, sort of is there from a work, however your image is in the working world versus your image sort of in your personal life, and the two kind of can go together.
Yeah, that a lot of clients start their conversation with me at that point where they feel like who they are at work is one way, and then when they get home, they're a totally different way. And so whether that's at work, they're feeling exhausted or burnt out, or always have to show up as being, quote unquote, on from like an extroverted place. And then they go home and they bring that exhaustion, or they just like turn off when they come home. Trying to blend who you are in all places and all phases of your life is something that I definitely work on with my clients. Most of that's the mindset piece, right? Aligning who you are on the inside. I call it your inner platform, which is, kind of a marketing term. Oftentimes in branding, we talk about, the platform. Maybe that's social media, or if you're in a career, that's showing up, working on a committee or with your staff, for example, or in your leadership. That is your outer platform. But I work with clients on your inner platform, which is, developing your clear vision, where you want to go, what you want to become known for in the future, your mindset, self-awareness, and how to expand your energy. And I love playing in that like energetic field, especially as it relates to personal branding, because personal branding really kicks off from a place of mindset. It's who you are, what you believe in, how you show up, the personality, your personal reality, as like Dr. Joe Dispenza would say, and how that then shows up with other people and who you lead, or your children, like you said.
And what do you feel like is one of the most challenging things when you're trying to help people to sort of change their mindset, or kind of, I guess, either realize their sort of vision for their branding, or to kind of reach that goal of, matching what they actually want versus what's actually coming out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all mindset, I think. The first, it's interesting because like the first time I noticed that moment was when I wasn't a trained mindset coach. Instead, I was running my brand strategy studio, and I would consistently have clients who would like create an entire book, write it, we've got it ready to ship. Or I remember there was one client, we had an entire website built with these products she was going to sell, ready to ship. We just had to like purchase one more plugin or something like that, and then hit launch. And they start throwing up all these things to like block launching. No, we're not ready yet. Oh no, I don't want to spend that $60 on that plugin. No, and really it was, they were blocking themselves from launching, but it was really an internal job. They just didn't have the confidence or self-awareness to notice, oh wait, this is my ego, this is my nervousness, my imposter syndrome showing up, and I need to step through that space in order to hit launch and go move to the outer platform to step into your leadership. So once I recognize, oh wait, they're doing that thing, right? There's fear sometimes involved with really standing up and for your values, for your beliefs, who you are, some big moment you want to make in a meeting, whatever it is. But really, it's just that mindset moment and gathering self-awareness around your patterns and your habits, I think would be the first place to take a look, because you'll notice, oh, wait, I'm doing that thing I always do. What's another choice I could make? Yeah.
So it sounds like the idea of kind of having greater self-awareness, being able to recognize I'm doing this. I realize this is an issue. This is a pattern. How do I fix this? So then I can not, hinder myself from accomplishing what I want.
100%. Yeah. And you probably run into that as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that quite a bit with people I work with. And sometimes there's, a complete lack of awareness. Otherwise, there are other times where, especially there's a lot of anxiety, there may be in some ways a heightened sense of knowing that they do it, but still an inability to move past it.
Yeah, yeah. And then that's when people, will say, well, I'm stuck, or there's nothing I can do. Right. It's still kind of just throwing up a different version of I can't step through this moment. So
Right.
the
And I
whole
think
time
the,
it's
the
anxiety.
follow through can be tough. I think also for people that have a hard time with executive functioning. So in terms of planning, organizing, getting started, even if they know what they should do, there may be other things besides just the executive functioning piece, anxiety or other stuff at play. But if they legitimately have a hard time with planning and getting going with stuff, or they're so overwhelmed by everything else that they can't do it, that makes it very hard to sort of follow through even on stuff that they want to be doing.
Yeah, 100%. And then it could even come down to the smallest moment of like, what's the very first step you take? And then second, and then third, and you just, even for some of the highest level thinkers and leaders, it still comes down to, you put your shoes on in the morning and then you find your car keys, right? We still have to take these steps no matter where you are in life.
Right. And it's hard. I think some people have sort of more support around them than others. So there may be some very high level people that have certain areas maybe they're not as good at, but if they've gotten up to that point, they oftentimes have extra support that may help with, some of those day-to-day stuff that maybe they can't manage as well. Whereas other people that may be just as bright may not, if they haven't gotten that level in a certain career, don't really have that support around them to help with some of the, admin type stuff that maybe they're not as good at.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And then, you start finding yourself spinning your wheels, trying to do things you're not good at.
Right. And it's hard. I think in some cases it's easier to kind of get help with that or hire people to do stuff, but obviously not everyone has the ability to do that, or it's not feasible based on the circumstances.
Mhm. Which is why then they would hire you.
Right. So I help, right, exactly. So I help people to kind of take that step themselves, figure out, does it make sense to hire someone based on a circumstance, certain things, but more in general, have the ability to do it themselves over time. But sometimes it's also about starting very small. They can't suddenly say, I'm going to change my mindset and suddenly be organized if I'm not very organized. Like it's a matter of
Right.
kind of starting small, figuring out a system that's gonna work, and sometimes it's trial and error. Because if you have someone that's tried a million different apps to keep organized and none of them work, chances are it's probably not just the app.
Right. Well,
But it's about thinking about the follow through and making a plan that's visual. Because a lot of times if people hold too much in their head, that can sometimes make them anxious, but it's also hard to execute stuff. But first, again, some people are more visual than others, but being able to see a plan of these are things I need to do, the steps I need to take. Or maybe it's you have a task and you have subtasks for it and break it down to really small parts. For a lot of people, that can really help with increasing the follow through on whether it's doing something with expanding a business or just keeping track of household stuff.
yeah, 100%. When I work with my clients, we develop their clear vision declaration. So the clear vision is a representation of where they're going, what they want to be known for, the types of conversations they want to be in the future. And it's really big level brainstorming, creative process, but ultimately you go through, CLEAR is an acronym, and we narrow down. And when you get to the A, it's aspirational success. And the first step is to develop the massive mindset shifts. You only get 3. And then the mini milestones. And in the declaration, after we brainstorm really, really big, in the declaration, it says, my first step is to blank. Because they've got to have something. So the next day, after you have this huge, big brainstorming moment, you have this piece of paper that says, okay, my first step is to call so-and-so, right? It's got to like get them to hit launch and then start going.
Well, it sounds like you probably have to keep quite organized in order to navigate this with all your clients.
Yeah. Yes, very much so.
And like, what do you find works well for some of the clients that are maybe a little more disorganized to begin with, that have a harder time keeping track of what they should do? But regardless of difficulty with anxiety around, but just the practical level of they're not good at writing stuff down or checking a calendar, or if they say they're going to do something, remembering to do it.
Exactly. Well, I like to ask people how they like to learn. I think a lot of people that I end up working with have the desire to learn more, and the desire to learn about themselves in a different way. And so sometimes, whether it's, podcasts, text messages, audio messages, whatever venue that they like to learn, I'll take that cue and, play with them that way, right? And chat with them and help them learn that way. We also spend an enormous amount of time, even if they're the highest level leader, just on their foundational work. And that could even come down to simply like taking your vitamins. And it can get as granular as that, because, or how often are you working out? Do you need a personal trainer, right? Because sometimes those tiny little moments, if your foundation isn't set, right, you can't build a building on top of a really shaky foundation. And so checking in to see if that foundation, how much water are you drinking every day? And setting them up for success at that level. Some really high level clients, definitely need that type of work. And I can meet them there too, because again, I think it comes down to how people like to learn.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then you also make a really good point around the self-care. Then no matter where you are in terms of career or other stuff, if you don't have the basic self-care down in terms of sleep, hydration, nutrition, things like that, you're not going to function as well.
100%. Yeah. And I like to think of self-care as like the practice of loving yourself and having a relationship with yourself and loving yourself and being worthy of someone who takes their daily vitamins, someone who drinks 8 cups of water a day, someone who, right, uses that self-care as an expression of loving themselves. It starts to kind of weave in a new storyline too, versus I can't drink another cup of water today, right? Or, we start to toss out some of these self-care things pretty quickly when it becomes a burden.
Yeah. And I think there's also a difference between someone that just says, I can't do this and is fully aware of it versus, keeps forgetting to take their vitamin.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
I mean, because one of the things I spend a lot of time working with people on is even the basic stuff of, remembering to brush teeth or take vitamins, whether it's, use a, reminder, let's say in the reminders app or a task list or a calendar event, something that gets your attention, or, an Alexa, something that gets your attention. So this way you don't have to worry about remembering it if it's not something that naturally occurs and is easy to remember to do.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that, and I've got my daily planner here, and on it at the bottom, I will put V with a little check box next to it for vitamins, W with a little check mark next to it for water, right? M, meditation, and my meditations last all of maybe 5 minutes tops. But I just feel so like rewarded when I get to check them off every day. So yeah, I kind of do the same thing.
Very cool. Yeah. I mean, like what I use for mine, I'm definitely more of a digital person. First, I know some people are more paper, and obviously it's personal preference. But like I use reminders app, for example, for a lot of stuff. And I have the same thing where I have, take my vitamin, meditate, periodic reminders to drink water, whatever else makes sense to have in there. And, I think it definitely helps. There's that satisfaction of clicking it to mark it off, but then it's one less thing I have to remember to do because it's just, I see the list and I can follow it.
Yeah. And I think it's like your future self is setting you up for success each and every day if you do that.
Right. And especially when you can automate it, then you don't even have to keep plugging it in each day to do it. It's just you set it once and it's there each day.
Yeah. What other apps do you enjoy using for those purposes?
It depends. I mean, a lot of it is, I think, first of all, I think a lot of times it's the simplest apps that people have access to pretty easily. It's not often like this fancy app that's sort of a be all and end all. Like it's so for example, the idea I often suggest people, having a calendar. So whether it's Apple Calendar, Google Calendar, having, some basic calendar program. I mean, the nice thing is Apple Calendar, Google Calendar can pretty much sync with almost all other calendar apps. So if there's a certain app you like, you can run it from a Google Calendar or an Apple Calendar into there. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to view your stuff in different ways, but you have a very centralized system that you can use that, crosses over lots of different platforms. So usually a calendar and then a task list. I mean, a lot of it is you want to figure out what are your needs? Because if you just pick an app because someone says, oh, it's a great app, if it's not aesthetically pleasing to you, if it seems cumbersome to input stuff in, you're less likely to use it. So I would sort of figure out, what do you want first? Do you like color coding? And then figure out from there what particular program might make sense. I mean, some of the common ones that I often use a lot are, people are Todoist is one, TickTick, I mean, to-do list, I think, is very well known. Tick is not. Tick is really interesting because I think it's sort of it's similar to to-do list, but I think the interface is a little bit simpler. It has some interesting features, like it has a habit tracker. So you could put, drink water, work out, and then it allows you to mark off each time you do it. So it keeps track of, sort of how are you working towards achieving these certain habits.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and it also has a Pomodoro timer, so you can basically work for periods of time, take a break, and track it. And you can actually estimate your completion times and then track the actual time. So that can help improve estimations down the line.
See, so now it's like getting smarter for you.
Exactly. So kind of because also it's the act of thinking about it. The same way where even if you use the paper log and track how long something takes you to do, first of all, the act of tracking it is probably going to make you more efficient because you're timing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then pair with the idea, especially if it's similar tasks that you do over and over again, if you have absolutely no idea how long it takes, it's going to be really hard to sort of make estimations that are accurate. But if you track it, then over time, you're going to be able to make more accurate estimations and planning is going to get easier.
Right. No, I like that, especially like as a creative person. I spent 2021 writing a book that's going to be coming out in April. And I would write it in the mornings before the household would wake up. And I would use Insight Timer, which is, it's a meditation app, but I just use it for its music. And I would set it, right? Like I'd find a 40-minute track, I'd set it, forget it, and then write and think and do, doodle, whatever. And then the track would end. And I'd be like, oh, that's my cue. Okay, I'm done. And then I put my stuff away. So it doesn't have to be like an alarming alarm. And I used it for creative purposes and found a way to do it with like really beautiful free music because Insight Timer is free.
Yeah, well, that is a great idea and a great suggestion. And I think it also gets at the idea that by keeping track of the time in a certain way, especially something automated, you don't have to constantly look at the clock to figure out how much time do I have left. Because depending on what you're doing, that can really take away your focus. I mean, I do that a fair amount when I'm writing testing reports or articles. Like I want to be able to be immersed in that. I don't want to constantly be figuring out, how long till I have my next appointment. And so what I'll do is I'll set an alarm for a period of time. Sometimes it's the time I actually have to stop. Sometimes it's sort of a warning alert. And so it says to me, I know I have 20 minutes left. So it gives me to start thinking about wrapping up. But the idea then is that I can then be immersed in whatever I'm doing without having to worry about the time and keep looking at it. And then I'm also pretty unlikely then to forget about an appointment or something because I've clearly going to get interrupted based on the alarm when I need to stop what I'm doing to move on to whatever's next.
Yeah. I definitely use tech to support my ability to stay on time for things.
Yeah, there's a lot that you can do, but I think it's also a matter of making sure that because there's so much out there that you actually have it organized in some way. Because otherwise it's really easy to get yourself disorganized with and not have any idea how the stuff that you use actually works or links together.
Yeah, 100%. Like mine is a blend of paper reminders like this. I've got a large paper calendar for the house. I've got Google Calendar that's synced up with Calendly, but it has taken me a long time to find that that's my rhythm and that's what works best for me. And how even yesterday I was like narrowing down the types of Calendly events that I want to have turned on or turned off. So it's always kind of a rotating moment to refine. And even in like we were talking about branding, showing up as a leader, as a personal brand, narrowing and refining, how someone interacts with me and interacts with my time, like Calendly, for example. And the language that I use on how you can book an appointment with me is a reflection of how they're going to value your time also, which is an interesting place to play as well.
Yeah, and I think another point you brought up kind of in the context we just mentioned, this idea also of like think about the mindset of always sort of wanting to improve in some way. That if you never really, unless something's going terribly, you may not necessarily evaluate, I need to change this. But as long as it doesn't turn to sort of a perfectionist tendency, the idea of saying, how can I do this better? Like I periodically different stuff will evaluate, can I do this more efficiently? Is there a better way of doing this? Like I've gone through various iterations of, online scheduling, or I used to use Calendly. And then because I realized I didn't use it that much, at one point Google released some new, I I forget what it's called, but something where basically it's like an appointment slot, but it's where you create like a booking page. And so I started using that because I didn't use the Calendly enough anyway. And and basically this is free, it's included what I'm doing, and it's one less calendar I then have to set
Yeah,
to
I
start with the
know.
availability. And so that even years ago I used to basically take time, I had a set block of time each week to make receipts for the week. And then I realized at some point, instead of taking time to be able to do that, I can do it automatically through any sort of online portal that they'll automatically generate the invoice for you. And so I switched it, and then it saved me at least 45 minutes per week.
Oh, see, now you're talking my language. It's like,
Yeah.
how can you narrow down, refine and refine and optimize time? Yeah, I find that stuff fun.
Yeah, no, I do too. It's funny because with, like, for example, keeping track of stuff. So I use the reminders app, and so for a while I had this issue where when I tried to sync, I have some stuff that I see on both my personal devices and my work devices, and the other stuff's all just on work, just on personal. But I was having an issue where it wasn't syncing properly, and so I kept trying to figure this out. It wouldn't work. I finally talked to Apple. I think about 8 hours later, they finally like fixed it and realized that apparently there's actually a limit to the number of reminders you can have in. And because what happens is apparently I was being really productive, because what it does is apparently if you don't clear the complete reminders, that counts towards the quota. So I think with one of the updates, I don't know that the quota is still there, but I think at the time it was like 50,000 things plus like whatever you have in a calendar.
Oh
And so like basically stuff stopped syncing because apparently I had like 50,000 something, reminder, including all the completed ones over the years.
Okay, so you win. I don't know if anyone's ever had that problem before.
And it was definitely an unusual thing, but it definitely has worked a lot better since I learned how to clear them all.
Exactly. Yeah, I hear you on that. That's hilarious. And then Google, it took them 8 hours to figure that out.
Yeah, well, that was, I think, the second time. The first time they just had no idea what to do, and I think at that point it didn't seem like a big enough issue, so I didn't push it. But then I got to the point where it was messing up my productivity because I was putting stuff in on one device and it wasn't syncing. So then I realized that I made a plan, but it's not actually saving. So then that's taking me more time because it's not working properly.
Yeah, and
And
then
I almost switched to a different platform too, but I don't know. I at one point just want to give one more try because I just feel like for me, since it's built in some ways it's easier. And since I had so much in there, it would have taken me a while to then transfer it all into another program.
Yeah, I've run into that problem too. And then you're paying $20 a month for this, and you're paying $10 a month for this, and it's just not efficient.
Right. Yeah, that's hard. But also when you're working on projects with other people, like I used to do this for some of the stuff on board and kind of manage things. And so I use that just because that makes more sense for that particular thing. So I know I have to sort of check that, in terms of, being aware of it. But obviously, if I had 20 different programs, that'd be ridiculous to try to keep track of all of them. So I think a big lesson is it's okay to sometimes use more than one app for different things, but you want to have a clear purpose for each one and know how to check it.
Right. And if you're going to stay engaged or not.
Right.
Yeah.
And the same thing in general notifications, getting rid of the ones that you really don't need to begin with, because also the more you get used to ignoring notifications, the harder it's going to be to actually follow the ones that you need.
Yeah, I turned off my Google email notifications on my phone. I don't have any social media notifications on my phone for that reason. It's just like, it's like this moment of like, click, turn on, turn off. And I don't want that to be.
Yeah, I use mostly Apple devices, and it's great with the focus modes because I can basically deactivate sort of phone alerts, the phone from ringing and other stuff when I have appointments. And so it does automatically. Then when I see something in my calendar, it then basically puts everything on do not disturb.
Yeah,
which definitely helps, except when there's an issue and someone's trying to then call me. Like if it's not connecting or something, I didn't have to realize that and check the phone because I won't get an alert. So it's also good to understand how the technology works and how to undo certain stuff when you need to. But for a lot of people I work with, have a hard time with staying on task and being distracted easily, using programs that block access to stuff. Like for example, you can set it for, let's say during work time, I can't access Facebook or Instagram, on a phone or a computer. That can be a useful way to help reduce potential distractions. Or there's a fun one. It's a Google Chrome extension called Forest Focus, where what it does is a tree grows during the time that you're productive. And if you try to deactivate the program prematurely, it says it'll cut down the tree.
Oh, see, so there's a consequence to it.
Right. I mean, obviously it's not a real treat, but I think for a lot of people, it's enough of a motivator to stay on task.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we were talking about like tiny rewards for when you have a reminder and you get to add your check next to it. I had a client who we would always, we'd, laughingly call her Gold Star Girl because she is an executive, but loves to get that gold star and loves to have a job well done, but was forgetting some of her basic foundational work. So she got little gold stars that you would see, like, in grade school, and she would take those little stars and she would put it next to, vitamins, gold star, water, gold star. So it was like an analog way to do the check marks, but it's however works best, right? And I think finding what works best for you and then having fun with it, like cutting down your digital tree, is if that sticks and that works with you, then absolutely. Yeah.
Right. It's one size does not fit all. That's really about, it's a good message, finding kind of your own way of doing it that works for you. And sometimes it's trial and error to some degree as well. So it's important not to get discouraged if you're trying something that's not working. But if you keep, trying something else and keep working at it, then you're making progress towards it, even if it doesn't work perfectly.
Yeah, 100%. And that's kind of the fun thing too about, personal branding too, is that human beings change over time and we grow and we learn and we have new interests, and, following those interests and sharing them with others. That's personal branding at its core, is sharing with others and being a part of those conversations. You don't have to be an expert in any of them, but there's a lot of fun in the newness and the novelty of trying on and showing up in a different way. And I think that's one of the fun things that I get to do.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds fun. And I feel like in a different way, I do some of that as well. But yeah, there's a lot. It's nice because it's also, no day is the same. That there's always something new to be, doing or addressing, but I guess that's sort of human nature.
Yeah, that's what we get working with humans.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess, do you have any final comments or any sort of, things of wisdom you want to share with our listeners before we wrap up for today?
Ah, yes. The tree. I'm imagining this big tree growing. Well, a tree, this is so trite, but I love it. Like a tree, it's got to start with a little tiny seed, and you have to water it, give it sunshine, tend to it. It has seasons, just like human beings, and it ebbs and flows in the weather, right? And so I think there's a lot of forgiveness in how we show up, how we make mistakes, how we weather the storm, and coming from a place of self-awareness and building that strong inner platform, your foundation, and then sharing that with others. It definitely takes courage, but if you're committed to self-growth, self-care, and showing up and making an impact in the world, because I think we are all here for a reason to do that, then it becomes your job to do that. I think we all have gifts to share, and when we don't share those, is doing a disservice. So even if showing up for you is simply walking into a room and sharing some time and space with other people, I think that's a gift in itself.
Oh, that's great advice. Well, thank you. And I guess, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you or work with you?
Sure. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn at Lisa Guillot, and it's a funny last name, but Guillot, kind of like the guillotine. And I'm on Instagram, and also my website is bebrightlisa.com. And yeah, you can find me at all three of those places.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thanks again for being on. This was definitely a fun conversation. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.